welcome everybody, and a huge welcome to James Price, who, yeah. Obviously, we're hugely grateful to have him here with us today. I think this is probably rather more than he bargained for when he agreed to come and chat to a few students, but nevertheless. So James, as I'm sure some of you know, is a production designer and an art director. And he's worked on a number of films, many of which I'm sure that you will be familiar with. So you will notice that next to me there is a BAFTA and an Oscar. These are actually real, and James won these for Poor Things. You'll be, I'm sure, familiar with Paddington 2, which is another one of James's films. You were saying you were art director on that?
Yeah,
okay. The Iron Claw, I think, is a recent one of yours.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's one I production designed after Poor Things, actually.
Okay. And Judy, I think, is that the Judy Garland?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I haven't seen that, but I'm familiar with it. Yeah. So I think what might be really useful to start with is if you can actually tell us, for those who don't know, what a production designer does, and what an art director does, and how those roles are different and relate to one another.
Okay. So hello everybody. A production designer is the HOD, head of department in the art department, and is one of the kind of main creative forces in any film or TV show, alongside the director and the DOP, or director of photography, cinematographer, as they used to be called. And the three jobs usually create the world. So the production designer is very much in charge of creating the world of the story you're telling. So visually, you are telling the story. And if we were to tell the story of today, we'd need to find a theatre to tell it, and we'd need certain props. So everything you see on screen, other than the actor and what the actor's wearing, comes under the production designer's remit. Now, of course, the production designer can't do all of this on their own, so they have a team with them. Sometimes the team's small, sometimes the team's big. But the team under the production designer divides into two different departments on, say, something like Poor Things, if we're talking at that sort of scale. And the two different departments, it actually cascades into other departments, but there is the art department and the set decorating department. Now, the art department is led by a supervising art director, and then there are art directors that work alongside them. So, for example, something like Poor Things, we had a supervising art director, which is Adam Makin, and then we had an art director a lead art director who run London, one that run Paris, one that run Lisbon, one that run the ship, and they all then have mini teams. Now, an art director is very much like, I would say, an architect and a project manager all rolled into one. They do the technical drawings, they work out the logistics, they oversee the build. At the moment, there's a build going on for a film that I'm working on, and I have very little to do with that. I'm all about the visual and what it looks like. I will get involved when there's problems come up that will compromise the design or the budget, and get involved with that, but they run the day-to-day building of the sets. And the set decorators department do everything, I suppose you liken it to interior design. They're involved with, so the art directors in the art department are involved with the walls and the ceilings and the floors, and to make the wooden box and paint the wooden box. And the set decorating department deal with all the kind of chairs that we're sat on, the microphone I'm holding along with props, and this water, the chair, all of that sort of interior design stuff. And so there are many different jobs you can do in an art department. And then there's the graphic department, which work alongside, and so the graphics department would be designing what goes on this screen, the label on that bottle, maybe some wallpapers, maybe some. So there's then that section, and then you have a department called props, which, if you're kind of more hands-on and like making stuff, you may get involved with actually dressing the sets and making the model of we need an Oscar. It's not that easy to get an Oscar, so you'd have to make a model of an Oscar. So you have prop makers that will involve with that, and then you have construction teams that build the
Well,
sets.
you could just use yours, I suppose.
I could do now, yeah, I guess so.
I think something else that would be useful to hear about is actually how you got into this, what your journey was.
Was going to leave school at 16, as everybody did. And during my last year, though, I did some work experience for a stonemasonry firm renovating Hereford Cathedral. And so I did 2 days out of the week, and they offered me an apprenticeship. I just sort of had this ability to be able to carve. I did things in the first 2 days that people can't normally do in like 3 or 4 weeks. And so they were like, wow, you're natural, do you want an apprenticeship? And I was like, yeah, sure, I don't know what I'm going to do. And so that was it. I was going to go off to be a stonemason apprentice, and that fell through right at the last minute. And so it's 2 weeks before September and term started. My mum and I went on a mad dash around the local colleges. And luckily, in Hereford, there is an independent art college, and I went and interviewed for a BTEC for General Art and Design. I guess all of you guys are on a BTEC, right, or most of you? And so I just started this BTEC, General Art and Design, thinking that, oh, well, in a couple of years I'll reapply, the stonemasonry thing would happen again. And after a few weeks being there, the tutors were like, you guys can go to university. And this was back in the 90s, it's different now. So I went off to Derby after my 2 years and did a thing called Applied Arts, which was, again, just sort of making stuff, really. Because set design wasn't really a thing. There weren't many films being made. Where I grew up, no one I knew had done anything to do with media or film or TV. I always loved film growing up, and it was something that I really watched. That was my thing. I watched movies, but I didn't have any idea that you could get into it. And somewhere along that journey, somebody suggested film design, and so I got it in my head, and I was like, right, we need to get some work experience at the end of the second year. So I came and I had a couple of uncles that lived nearby, and I just turned up at Teddington Studio, which isn't there anymore, blagged my way in, found a construction company, they gave me some work experience, and then I heard about this company called Red Rhino, who were production designers, and I started ringing them, pestering them, faxing them with big long faxes saying, I need some work experience. And they wouldn't reply. And then I found out where they were in London, and I came down, I knocked on their door, and I said, look, I'm James. I've been the one sending you these faxes. And they the person opened the door was like, well, you better come in, we better get you some work experience then. Because it was just, I will not take no. I was like, I'm going to do this. And so when I finished my uni, the construction company that I worked for, or not worked for, done some work experience with, introduced me to a production designer. I went and showed my university work, very proud of my university work, and said, look, can I have a job? And he was like, no, you can't. None of your work has got any relevance. You have no skills that I can use. He said, but there is a master's degree in Kingston Uni at the time. It's stopped now, and you should probably apply for that. So I applied for that. I know it's a very long story, sorry. I applied for that. I got the skills. In the long and short of it, I learned how to make models and kind of do technical drawing to a fashion. And on the back of that, I got out, and that's where I met Liz, actually, and got my first job in an art department. Again, I had to lie, say that I lived in Wales. I didn't. So what the moral of the story I'm saying is, if you want something, you've got to go and get it. It's not going to come to you.
Yeah.
Especially if you haven't got a contact. A lot of people know people. You guys live in probably the best part definitely the best part in the world. Right here is the epicenter of film production in the world. It's not in LA. It's kind of Atlanta has a bit here, more than anywhere. There's so many studios. All of the big movies are made here, and you will know someone who knows someone at work. So if you want to get some work experience, whatever, you can do it. And what's great about working in TV and film is it's a blue collar job. Other creative disciplines, you've got to make the stuff and then try and sell it or find out. You don't do a day's work and get paid. We do a day's work. It might be very long, but we get paid for that day. And you have it's kind of you work, you get paid. It's that simple, and it's also really creative and collaborative. But That said, my route is my route. Everybody's route's different, and I don't necessarily think that you need to go to university nowadays, because obviously it costs a lot more money than it did when I did. And I mentored someone recently who didn't want to go to university. That she was quite sure it wasn't for her, and she applied. There was a mentor scheme with BAFTA, I think it was, or might have been the BFI, and I picked her to mentor because of this very reason. And so she'd done short courses, learned how to draft, and she just did a junior drafting job on Paddington 3. So you can get in that way.
Lovely. So if you've got a question for James, put your hand up and we'll come to you.
What's your favourite movie that you've worked on?
I think The Nest, Jude Law, Carrie Coombe. It was the first film that I production designed, and it was with my good friend Sean Durkin and Matthias Elderly, they're the TP and director. And so it was completely new. I kind of naively thought there wasn't much difference between art directing and production designing, but it's way better production designing. Art directing is very stressful. You have to deal with a lot of idiots that, like namely your boss. I'm now that main idiot.
As production designer, how many hours do you work on a film?
Oh, that's a good question. Lots and lots. I mean, a standard day is from 8 a.m. in the morning till, depending, 6 or 7 at night. But you will do more than that as a production designer, especially early on when you're trying to get the ideas out. And so those days are 5-day weeks. So some people who have no off switch will work 18 hours a day. I mean, I don't, but yeah, it's not a short day, and everybody in the office is working that long as well. You know, not just me. You will come in as a runner or a set junior into an art department if you chose to do that, or in fact, any department. You would come in and you will be doing 11-hour days, probably 12, 5 days a week. And yeah, it's tough.
And at what stage of production is your job over? When do you get to go home or move on to the next job?
Well, traditionally it would be the day you finish filming as a production designer. The art director, you have a few days after to what we call wrap. But more and more, poor things especially, I stayed on with a small team of concept artists, and we did 6 months doing VFX shots that we then handed over to the VFX company to make it more seamless. And I think that's something that on a big film will become more and more, or I hope becomes more and more common, that the production designer stays on. It's also quite nice that period, because you can do 9 till 5, have a nice life, and it's usually in London, and so you can take the advantage of that.
Is there any job on set that you envy?
The only job that I would rather do, maybe, I don't know if I would rather do it actually, anymore, directing, to be the director. I mean, that's the boss. That's the best job.
How was it to work with the director of Portings?
How was it to work with Yorgos? Yorgos is a man of few words. He's kind of unique in terms of all the directors I've worked with, because he, a lot of directors, and in fact, not a lot of directors have an idea of what they want their film to be. I mean, the ones that really know what their film to be, like Wes Anderson, would never hire someone like me, because I'd be too busy telling him how I think the film should be, and he wouldn't like that. So Yorgos is very much, takes a long time picking his creative collaborators, and then he will, even if he has an idea, he will sit back and wait to see what you're going to bring. And he kind of, I mean, if you've watched any of his films, he likes observing the absurdity in life and human interaction. So he kind of enjoys that, I think, and he really enjoys people flailing, not sure what to do. I think he gets off on that a little bit. But then when you realise that he has seen something in you as a creative, that can be liberating. And I'm working with him again now, and the second time is way more enjoyable than the first time, because the silence it's just the silence, and you get used to it, and and it's just easier to navigate. He's searching for and how to get that out of him. But yeah, it's also, he's fearless. So a lot of filmmaking is about playing it safe. That's why it's not very progressive as an art form. It's a business essentially. But with Yorgos, he very much treats it as an art form. So you're seeing true creative endeavours, and he does not care about the business side of it. He's aware of it. He's not stupid, because he wouldn't have got to where he is. But he has maybe been able to carve out a space for himself, which is rare in filmmaking, that we are able to do what we like. No one's going to come in and tell us as a creative force that we can't do it the way we want to do it.
How was it like to win an Oscar, and what was your experience being there? And did you meet any interesting people around there?
So I've always been arrogant enough to think I'd win a BAFTA. So that was I was like, oh yeah, we've gone to the BAFTAs finally. Every year in our house, I don't know if you lot know Only Fools and Horses, you're probably still too young, but I used to say to Liz, this time next year we'll be at the BAFTAs, like Delboy used to say to Rodney, this time next year we'll be millionaires. Anyway, the Oscar though was a bit too big to comprehend. I mean, no one I'd ever worked with. Judy won, Renee Zellweger won an Oscar for Best Actor on that, leading actress, but no one that I've worked for or worked under had ever been nominated, I don't think. So it was a very big ordeal just to get nominated, and I found that actually much more terrifying than the winning, because by that time we'd kind of thought we were going to win because we'd won everything else and we'd had time to get used to it. But it was a pretty surreal experience. The thing that will always stay with me is an event like BAFTAs. You go up to the Royal Festival Hall and you go in and you just get let in. But with the Oscars, you get picked up in this big blacked out esplanade and you drive through the streets of LA, and there are street after street cordoned off with police, with guns. There are people protesting about what's going on in Palestine, pro-lifers, gay rights, lots and lots of protests, individual protests, block after block, and all you can see in front of you are these blacked out cars that are the same, that we're all riding in. And then and then there's sniffer dogs sniffing for bombs, and you eventually get out at the place at the beginning of the red carpet, and there are hundreds of people screaming like, these are the people that are celebrating, not protesting. And the enormity of it then strikes you, and it was just about managing emotion, because it was kind of crazy. And then when we went into the theatre itself, it felt like a dream. It was very surreal. I didn't feel like I was there at all, to be honest. I just was like, but I was pretty confident we were going to win. So I was like, we've got to get up there and not mess this up. And then in terms of people I've met, celebrity-wise, we met in the lift, Danny DeVito and Arnie Schwarzenegger.
There's a twins reunion.
Well, twins reunion, yeah, which was quite cool, because I actually had 2 Oscars, because I had the set decorators one. Oh, by the way, set decorator gets an Oscar, but poor old supervising art director doesn't. And so I'm holding Zuji's and mine, and Shona's in the corner, and Danny and Arnie walk in. So they look at us and they, congratulations, and we were like, thank you very much. And one of them says to me, nice suit. I said, thank you very much. I had it made, and I handed one Oscar to one of them, Danny, or I can't remember. And I opened the jacket up and I said, look what I had embroidered on the inside. And I'd had Poor Things and the date, that date. And they both looked in like this and went, cool. So that was quite nice. And they got out. And then we met, after we won the BAFTA, we met Michael J. Fox in the lift. So it's kind of crazy, the people you meet in lifts at these things.
I'm just going to ask, with a project that is that big, how you get started, where you get your inspiration from, what your kind of process is.
The process starts with reading the script, so that's the first thing. And then you get told, because if on the paper you read the script and it's like 1890s or 1980, whatever it was, 1890s London, and lecture theatre, blah, blah, blah. So anyone else making that film, and you kind of going for a period movie, right? So it's period with a bit of Frankenstein, coming of age Frankenstein movie. But what you're told is like, Yorgos, and I don't know whether he told me at this stage, I think it was a brief when you get given the script, wanted to do it as a studio movie, and because Bella's made up. And so you're like, it's no point doing it as a straight movie because it's Yorgos and he wants to build everything. It's a fantastical world. And then the script is really funny and it's kind of weird. So you just start referencing. And that was what was actually really useful about having two of us do it, because there was so much to build and do in a short time. But also, we think very differently, Sharon and I, and we had different references. And we worked where Yorgos is a vacuum sometime and not really giving you much direction. You're bouncing ideas off each other. And with creative endeavours, I believe that if you're isolated and don't bounce ideas off people, that idea will never evolve very quickly. You'll hit stumbling blocks or a brick wall, and that's as far as you can get. But when you are bouncing ideas off one another, it completely evolves and it gets somewhere quicker than it will on your own. And so that's one of the beautiful things about working in an art department. And there are so many people and personalities that bring, a world is made up of so many different artists and architects and designers. So you kind of have to do that. So we just referenced so much, and we kind of like did a magpie sort of go. We were just picking references from whatever we liked. We spoke early on, and we made a little dogma of what we thought London would be, and we mostly talked about what we didn't like. Personally, and that was which was quite a clever thing to do, because we didn't go down a route. We didn't go down a route of something that neither of us liked, where we may have made that mistake if we hadn't have had the conversation early on. Because I'd never met Shona before.
It's very much a sort of fantasy version of London, isn't it? And Paris and Lisbon and Alexandria, is it? Yeah. So I think, sort of building on Rebecca's question, what kind of sources did you look at? I mean, did you look at other movies? Did you look at art?
A lot of art. There was Egon Schiele. There was Francis Bacon. We looked at Albert Robert, which was a French futurist. He's a bit like Arthur C. Clarke of his time, and he'd done these kind of beautiful illustrations around about the time that we were set, of what the 20th century would look like, end of the 19th century, with these kind of crazy flying machines and sort of battleships. And there's this great illustration, which is probably on this PDF somewhere, if you can zoom down. Yeah, here. So just behind my head here, this is this illustration I was talking about. If you look at the colour palette of that's very similar to Lisbon. The ideas for the trams came from here too, these floating trams. So he was hugely influential. Ricardo Bofill, who is a Spanish architect who died recently, a couple of years, for the more modernist, brutalist versions of Lisbon as well. We looked at a lot of anatomical drawings, paintings from the time, to get the kind of. We talked a lot about not having much gore in it, and so the anatomical drawings were hugely influential on Baxter's house and how we approached Baxter, because he has these mad animals that he's cut and shut together.
This is Willem Dafoe's character.
Yeah. And so we thought he would splice the architecture of his house. The idea of the house was much older, and he'd sort of spliced it together. In fact, the process of designing that house, Shona had done a sketch, and I'd done a sketch, and we sat down and we cut our sketches up and stuck it back together like a collage. I don't know where that sketch, where that is now, to create the design for Baxter's exterior. And so we worked very much like that. We would take it in turns to leapfrog one another. The main film, there were a lot of film references, but we didn't learn until years later that some of them, we would watch them and go, did you watch that film about the the horses and the beasts. You know, like I don't know why we're watching that movie. Couldn't think why. And then we were doing a Q&A in New York, and they were asking Yorgos about his film references, and he said, "Oh well, you know, there was a bunch of films, but many of them were just, oh, this is a great film. They made a great film. Let's make a great film." And we were like, "Oh, it would have been nice to know that 3 years ago, that we wouldn't." But there's a film called Bram Stoker's Dracula that Francis Ford Coppola made. If you haven't seen that, you should watch it. And their process to the film was that cinema was just being born around about the time the book was made, so they made it as if the film had been made when the book had been released. So they used a lot of very old school techniques that, and so even though that was 30 years earlier, it was like 1990, it was the nearest film to what we were trying to do. We were trying to make a 1930s movie with techniques as if they were made today. That was still the way that you made films. And so they used miniatures. We used a lot of miniatures, and things like Lisbon was miniatures, which was really cool. If you keep going down on the PDF, we can have a look at Alexandria.
Oh, Alexandria, I think, was my favourite. That wonderful tower.
So stop. So that's building here. So one of the wonders of the ancient world, supposedly, was the lighthouse at Alexandria. And so we thought, what if it was still there? I mean, that's our version of it. But we had to tell quite a lot in this story. You have to make decisions as a production designer of like how to use your resources. And this is a really kind of crucial moment. She learns that the world is not just, and it's pretty unjust. And it's a big moment. And they go to this city. Our Alexandria is an island. Obviously, the real Alexandria is joined up to North Africa, so that was kind of fun to do that. So we made this whole miniature and built 2 sets. These were the sets, and then where that little bit of green screen is on the miniature, that we composite it into there, where you can see actually on the top left. And we had an LED screen around the outside. As you can see, we didn't do the water in the end. That was a last-minute decision not to do that for real. But that's kind of like cutting-edge technology using the LED rather than green. Now people are using LED because you get interactive light, and it just creates a whole better look. We sort of broke the rules with making this film. Early on, I was involved really early on with the budgeting of the whole movie, which kind of doesn't happen. In fact, the only times I've had it is with a Yorgos movie, and that's what we're doing now. Is the same thing. We've budgeted first. So when he talked about wanting to build everything, it was way beyond everybody else's skill set on the film, way beyond my skill set. I had kind of done Paddington 2, which was big, and I'd done A Boy Called Christmas. Helped budget that with a backlot, so I had an understanding of how it could work at this scale. But there's usually a rule which is 10% of the overall film budget goes to the art department. We had 22% of the overall budget for this. So we are, and this is one of the reasons it was so stressful, was because when you have 10%, you have longer to shoot, you have longer to develop the film. So we were stacking all the cards in the favour of the art department, but it was kind of so great that we had to deliver sets that were over £1 million every other week, which is pretty tough doing. And the thing about filmmaking is, the set has to be ready the day you're going to shoot. There's no like, oh, we didn't get it ready in time, we put off shooting. That is fixed in stone, that date. And you have to hit it, and there's no excuses. Even if it's going completely wrong, you have to find a way of delivering that set on time, on budget. So we built the budget of the film was built around the budget that we put in as an art department. When we originally started making the film, we concepted for about a month. The whole process was, can you collaborate together? We did a week together. Yorgos liked it, and then they were like, can you do another 4 weeks? And we were like, well, it won't happen, this movie. So we did the 4 weeks. And the whole time we could walk away, but part of the 4 weeks was to try and get a budget together. So after we concepted and presented it all to Yorgos, we did a budget, and then the film was then sent to the budget was sent to Searchlight, who are part of Disney, and they have Searchlight make kind of a lot of great films, and they have a maximum threshold of $30 million that they're allowed to invest in a film without having to go upstairs to Mr. Bob Iger. So this was going to be 50, so they had to go up to Bob and say, can we make this movie, which is a very challenging movie if you've seen it, and convince them to make it, which is kind of crazy. But all of the other films that I was saying earlier, all of the films that were nominated for an Oscar this year were at least 3 times as expensive to make as in ours. And people don't realise that, what we've delivered on. I mean, it sounds a lot of money, 50 million quid, and it is a lot of money, $50 million. But, you know, something like Oppenheimer, what it says on the internet is usually a bit more. It costs a bit more than what they've put. But I would hazard a guess that's like a $220 million, between $220 and $250 million movie.
Yeah, I think
around there.
your average sort of Marvel movie is about that, isn't it?
Yeah. And they do a lot of green screen and a lot of post-production work. And that's how we were able to save a lot of money. We did a lot on camera, and it's still cheaper to do it in camera than it is to do it in post-production.
How much time did it take to kind of build all of the sets?
So London was 16-week build, and that includes dressing it as well. Lisbon was 22. Paris, I want to say, was 12. The ship was 8. That was hard convincing someone to build that ship. So they were like, that can't be done in that time. And I think this Alexandria bits were 4 weeks. So not a great deal of time. Something like the last Batman backlot. I don't know if you saw the last Batman film. That was a 6-month build. So that would have been 22 weeks as well. But Lisbon, you know, you're not talking buildings within buildings. It's sort of a street, and those shops are facades with a little bit of a, thing. So it's pretty complex to do.
What was the hardest set to make?
From a purely construction point of view, Lisbon. Could we go back to Lisbon? It's not someone that we could just bring up the Lisbon photos. So Lisbon was the biggest set, but also because, that's great, thanks. Because there's a waterfront, that sketch up there, you can see this arch here. In front of that was a water tank. That arch, I think, is about 1.20 meters off the ground. So all of the buildings, or the floor stage is down there, and all the buildings are up higher. And as you went away from the arch up towards the hotel, it got up higher, and it got to about 3 meters, 3.5. So we figured that the only way to build this was to build each individual blocks as you would a skyscraper. So they were steel framed, and the steel frame went up, and then they were clad with the what we call flattage, so that's usually timber, OSB board, MDF kind of stuff, and then any plaster was put on it and rendered and finished. So each block was finished, and we started at the waterfront and moved back because all the machines had to come up off the floor. And once we finished that, as we were moving back, a big, huge water tank was built. At the same time, there was a 55-meter backdrop put up, which was a canvas and was painted by hand with their what do you call them, things. And we had 3 guys do that who all came from the UK. They're probably I'm not even sure if there's anyone in America that can paint that size anymore. And once we were moving back, we then started to build the streets in and around, and that was at a timber frame. And on top of the timber frame went some soundproofing, because you've got to, if you walk around a hollow like this, you get an echo, and that's not good for sound recording. So we had to insulate underneath so the reverberation didn't hit the concrete floor and then bounce back up. And then we put OSB board down. On top of that was a concrete pour. You've got concrete going on there, which is all, and then there's a stencil stamp, which makes the cobble shape. And then on top of that, they're all individually painted. There's a kind of mad yellow brick road. I think you just see there. There's a bit of a, it's very light, but there's a painted pattern on there. And so it all had to go backwards. And then, of course, it's got to be lit because it's in a stage. So the lights had to go up before anything else did. So it's a process of it becomes very complicated to do that stuff. But that is, you know, this would have been a great set to art direct. I would have loved to art direct this set because of the complexity of that build. It made it very tricky to do but also fun.
You said in the film that it was filmed in Budapest. Was it made in Budapest, or did it all get shipped out? Was it made in the US?
Oh no, all made. Yeah, you make it where you wouldn't. The odd little set sometimes gets shipped around the world for various tax dodge reasons, but no, something like this is done. Yeah, so it's all Hungarian crafts people, great sculptors. The only people that craft wise that we took out were the painters for the big backdrops, because, like I say, you can't get them anywhere else in the world really.
So we are obviously learning still. What is like the one thing you've learned in your career that you think is most important?
Yeah, go with your feeling. You got, you know, use your sense. It's got to feel right and stay true to what you think is the right course. Yeah, that's just survival instinct, I think. But it's important in life.
Are you ever planning on being director at some point in the future, if you ever have like future projects?
I have directed a couple of short little films. I'm not sure is the real answer. I go between yes sometimes. And
It's not unprecedented, is it, for production designers to move into directing?
No, I mean Ridley Scott started off as a production designer. He was staff at the BBC famously.
Do you, for the one that's at the right corner where the drawn painting, for some of the films, did you have to include water in those in some of the sets?
Yeah, this one did have water. Well, actually, I don't know. It's only more of this, but I can't remember what's on this PDF. But yeah, if this one here, you're in Paris there. But that would have been taken from where the water tank would have been. That's unfinished, that set, but I don't think there is actually.
Oh.
But yeah, we built a water tank, and then we did a lot of the chapter headings, which I haven't talked about. Emma Stone is like immersed in water quite a lot. We had this paddling pool, large scale paddling pool that we would put her in to do all the kind of elements that you then composite in post production together to create the chapter headings. It's the real kind of moments of the, you know, moving from one chapter to another.
What was the most challenging part?
The one thing that did take a long time to resolve, probably the longest, was actually the skies, because everybody wanted a different thing with the skies. Shona wanted it really, really surreal, and like completely painted, and you know, Robbie, the DP, wanted it kind of pretty much like a real sky, and then Yorgos and I was somewhere in the middle of that sliding scale, and so. And because it didn't really need resolving, it needed resolving for the ship. If you've got the ship, should we just go to the ship quickly, actually, because that's worth just talking about the LEDs. The ship made it so, yeah, if you see here on the left, that is an LED backdrop. It was 11 metres high, 50 metres long, and it curved round, and that water and the sky is all on the LED and then shot with interactive. So we had to sort of decide. So we kind of went for more supernatural skies, and we built elements of. There's a guy called Chris Parks who does is an artist who does these kind of mad chemical reactions in water under macro lenses. Sort of Terence Malick's Tree of Life, the beginning of the universe. He's done all that stuff, but we just used little elements of them. If you look at the very, very top of that picture, there's some little dots in there. We would use real skies, and so that actually was one of the most trickiest things to resolve with the skies and what the skies should be in our world. That was pretty hard. This is one of the chapter headings actually, and this is sort of these elements were shot. This is Chris Parks actually. No, it's not. That's blood cells. That's not Chris Parks. And then there was a hand shot with an illustration on the front was put on, and then Emma Stone was actually we set up It's a series of boxes, and that she moved around, and then it was all composited together in post-production.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, if you haven't seen Poor Things, you really must, not only for James's design, although that's a pretty good reason, but it's a great film anyway. All right, so I think that just about concludes things. So we'll wrap up now. So huge thanks to James. That was a very illuminating, fascinating chat, and I'm sure you would all like to show your appreciation. Thanks very much. Cheers.